Welcome back to Char TV. I'm Mason, and tonight we're diving deep into something truly unsettling. Haunted houses. Not the ones in movies, not the ones on amusement park rides, but real stories. True encounters. The kind that make people pack their bags in the middle of the night and never look back. There's something about a haunted house, isn't there? A place that was meant to be safe, warm, a home, turned into something wrong. Sometimes it starts with whispers in the walls. Sometimes it's a shadow that shouldn't be there. And sometimes it's something much, much worse. Tonight I've got 7 terrifying haunted house stories for you, each one darker than the last. If you think you've heard them all, trust me, you haven't. So before we begin, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and turn on notifications, because here on Char TV, we bring you the best in horror, and you don't want to miss what's coming next. Now, are you ready? I never believed in ghosts, not growing up in Jersey, not during my years hustling in Philly, not even when my wife Tara would binge those late-night paranormal shows and swear she felt something in our old apartment. I'd laugh it off, tell her it was the radiator clanking, or the neighbor's cat scratching at the walls. But after we moved into the house on Cutler Road, I stopped laughing. What happened there? It's not something I can explain away. It's not something I'll ever forget. We bought the place in the summer of 2024, a steal at $320,000 for a 3-bedroom colonial just outside Poughkeepsie, New York. Tara found it online, 2 stories, wraparound porch, big backyard with a rusted swing set, left by the previous owners. The listing said it was built in 1912, needed some work, but nothing we couldn't handle. We'd been renting a cramped 2-bedroom in the city, saving every penny from my mechanic gig and Tara's remote bookkeeping job to get our daughter Ellie a real home. She was 7, all pigtails and gap-toothed grins, obsessed with her sketchbooks and that beat-up stuffed rabbit she'd had since she was 2. The idea of her having a yard to play in, a room of her own, it felt like a fresh start. We signed the papers in July, moved in by August. The first few weeks were fine, quiet, normal. At least, that's what I told myself. The house had character. Creaky hardwood floors, chipped crown molding, a fireplace we swore we'd fix up for winter. But it also had a smell, faint at first, like damp earth and something sour, like old fruit left to rot. I figured it was the basement. The realtor had warned us about water damage down there from a busted pipe years back. I'd get around to bleaching it, I thought. There were other quirks too. The lights flickered sometimes, even after I swapped the bulbs, and the windows stuck no matter how much WD-40 I sprayed. Tara noticed the cold spots first, little patches in the living room where the air felt like it dropped 10 degrees. It's an old house, I'd say, shrugging it off. Drafty as hell. She'd nod, but I could tell it bugged her. Ellie settled in fast. She claimed the upstairs bedroom with the slanted ceiling and the little window overlooking the backyard. She'd spend hours up there, drawing in her sketchbooks, trees, rabbits, weird swirly shapes she said were secret codes. She'd always been a quiet kid, happy to entertain herself, so we didn't think much of it. But around the 3rd week, she started talking about her friend. It came up at dinner one night over spaghetti and meatballs. She likes my drawings, Ellie said, twirling her fork. Who does? Tara asked. The girl in my room, she said, like it was nothing. She's shy, but she watches me draw. I chuckled, figuring it was an imaginary friend. Kids do that, right? Tara smiled too, but I caught the quick glance she shot me, that flicker of unease. The next few days, Ellie kept mentioning her. She says the house is hers, she told us one morning, munching cereal at the kitchen table. She doesn't like the basement, though. Says it's mean. I raised an eyebrow. Mean how? Ellie shrugged. Just mean. Tara suggested it was the move stirring her imagination, maybe the stress of a new school starting soon. I agreed, but I started paying attention. Ellie's sketchbooks filled up faster, page after page of those swirls, some with eyes scribbled in the middle, watching. I'd flip through them when she wasn't around, feeling a prickle on my neck I couldn't shake. Then the noises started. Late at night, after we'd all gone to bed, I'd hear footsteps, soft, uneven thumps, like someone pacing upstairs. The first time I grabbed the baseball bat from under our bed and crept up the stairs, heart pounding. Ellie's door was cracked open, her nightlight casting a faint glow. She was asleep curled under her blanket, rabbit tucked under her chin. The hallway was empty. I chalked it up to the house settling, old beams groaning in the night. But it kept happening, 2-3 times a week. Sometimes I'd hear a giggle, high and quick, cut off like someone clapped a hand over their mouth. Tara heard it too. Mice? She whispered one night, clutching my arm. In the walls? I didn't buy it, but I set traps anyway. They stayed empty. By September, things got weirder. Ellie started leaving her room at odd hours. I'd find her in the kitchen at 3 a.m., barefoot in her pajamas, staring at the basement door. She wants me to go down there, she'd say, voice sleepy but calm. Who does? I'd ask, steering her back to bed. My friend. I'd tuck her in, lock her door from the outside with the little slide bolt we'd installed. She'd never locked it herself before, and sit up in the hall listening. The footsteps didn't come those nights, but the air felt heavy, like someone was holding their breath just out of sight. Tara found the first note a week later. It was tucked under Ellie's pillow, scribbled in black crayon on a torn sketchbook page, "Stay with me." Ellie's handwriting was messy, all loops and smudges, but this was neat, precise, like an adult faking a kid's scroll. Did you write this? Tara asked her at breakfast. Ellie shook her head, crunching her toast. She did. She says I'm her favorite. My stomach dropped. I searched her room that afternoon, under the bed, in the closet, behind the dresser. Nothing but dust and a few stray crayons. That night I bolted the basement door shut, double-checked every window. The house felt like it was watching us. October hit and the subtle stuff turned sharp. The cold spots spread, whole rooms now, icy enough to see your breath. The lights didn't just flicker, they'd dim slow like someone was turning a dial, then snap back on full blast. Ellie's friend stopped being a side note. She'd talk about her constantly. She likes my hair. She says Daddy's loud. She wants me to draw her more. The sketches got darker. Those swirls turned into faces, thin and pale, with hollow eyes and stretched mouths. I'd catch Ellie humming sometimes, a tune I didn't recognize, low and droning, like a lullaby gone wrong. Tara wanted to move. This isn't normal, Mike, she'd hiss after Ellie went to bed. Something's here. I didn't argue, but we couldn't afford it. Not yet. I promised we'd figure it out. Then came the night that broke me. It was October 28th, a Wednesday, cold and foggy outside. Tara was at a late Zoom meeting in our bedroom, and I was downstairs nursing a beer and scrolling through my phone on the couch. Ellie had been in the backyard earlier, kicking a soccer ball against the fence. I'd watched her from the kitchen window, her little figure darting through the dusk. She'd come in around 6 p.m., muddy and giggling, and I'd sent her upstairs to wash up. Dinner was takeout pizza, and she'd chatted through it about her friend teaching her a new game. Hide and seek, but backwards, she'd said, sauce on her chin. You don't look, you listen. I'd smiled, distracted, told her to finish her slice. Around 9 p.m., I heard her voice from upstairs. Daddy, come play, she called, soft and sing-song. I set my beer down, figuring she wasn't asleep yet. Ellie, it's bedtime, I shouted back, but the voice came again, insistent. Daddy, please, it's fun. I sighed, hauled myself off the couch and climbed the stairs. Her door was open, the nightlight glowing. She was sitting on the floor in her pink pajamas, legs crossed, that rabbit in her lap. What's the game, kiddo? I asked, leaning against the frame. She looked up, grinning, too wide, too still. Hide and seek, she said. You close your eyes, I'll hide. I humoured her. All right, but quick, 5 minutes. I shut my eyes, counted to 10 out loud, the floor creaking under my boots. Ready or not, here I come, I said, opening them. The room was empty. Her blanket was rumpled, the rabbit gone. I checked the closet, nothing. Under the bed, just dust. Ellie? I called, stepping into the hall. A giggle floated from downstairs, that same high-clipped sound I'd heard before. My chest tightened. I took the steps 2 at a time, the air growing colder with every thud. In the living room, she was standing by the basement door, back to me, her pigtails bobbing as she swayed. The bolt was undone. How the hell had she managed that? Ellie, get away from there, I snapped, crossing the room. She didn't turn, just kept swaying, humming that damn tune. Daddy's loud, she said, voice flat, not hers. I grabbed her shoulder, spun her around, and froze. Her face was wrong. The eyes were too big, too dark. like ink pools swallowing the whites. Her grin stretched ear to ear, teeth sharp, glinting. "Play with me," it said, and the voice wasn't Ellie's, it was deeper, layered, like two people speaking at once. I stumbled back, heart slamming against my ribs. "Where's my daughter?" I choked out. It tilted its head, slow, unnatural, like a puppet on strings. "I'm right here, Daddy," it said, stepping closer, bare feet silent on the floor. The rabbit dangled from its hand, one eye missing, stuffing leaking out. I bolted upstairs, yelling for Tara. She burst out of the bedroom, pale, phone still in her hand. "What's wrong?" she gasped. I didn't answer, just tore through Ellie's room again. The bathroom, our closet. Empty, empty, empty. Then I heard it, a faint thump from outside. I ran to the window, yanked it open, and there she was. Ellie, my real Ellie, in the backyard, kicking her soccer ball against the fence in the fog. Mud on her sneakers, pigtails swinging, alive. I spun back to the stairs, and that thing was at the bottom, staring up at me, still grinning, still holding the rabbit. "Who the fuck are you?" I roared, voice breaking. It didn't answer. It just giggled, that clipped, hollow sound, and slipped into the shadows by the basement door, gone. We grabbed Ellie, threw what we could into the car, and peeled out of Cutler Road that night. Stayed at a Motel 6 off I-84, didn't sleep. Tara sobbed. Ellie clung to me, asking why we left her rabbit behind. I couldn't tell her it wasn't hers anymore. We never went back, not for the furniture, not for the clothes, nothing. The house is still there, last I checked, listed again for $280,000. Fixer-upper, the ad says. No mention of the basement, the cold, the thing that wore my daughter's face. I see it in my dreams sometimes, those ink-black eyes, that grin, that hum. My old Uncle George used to say the old things don't let go once they've claimed you. I don't know what it was, but I know it's waiting, and I know it's not done with us. I don't tell this one often, because I still don't like thinking about it. Even now, years later, I still wake up some nights, heart pounding, sure I can hear it again. This was back in 2011. I was 24, living in Cardiff, working a job I hated, when my mate Callum offered me a house-sitting gig. He had this uncle, rich guy, owned a holiday home out in the Brecon Beacons, proper beautiful place tucked in this valley, all rolling hills and mist in the mornings, the kind of house you see in magazines, you know. Huge windows, sleek modern design, like a Bond villain's lair but with sheep outside. Uncle was off in Dubai for a month, and Callum was supposed to stay there, make sure everything was fine, but he had plans and figured I'd be up for it. "It's easy," he told me. "Feed the dog, keep the heating on, don't burn the place down. Plus, it's free, like a holiday." I was skint and needed a break, so I said, yeah. Took the train out, drove the rest of the way in Callum's old Peugeot, and got there just before sunset. And mate, this place? It was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows facing the valley, wood-panelled everything, the kind of kitchen you'd see in a cooking show. The only thing I didn't like was the silence. No traffic, no voices, just wind rolling over the hills. At first it felt peaceful, then it started to feel empty. The dog, a big black lab named Alfie, seemed on edge too. He kept pacing, ears twitching, like he was listening for something. But I figured new person, new routine, he'd settle. First night was fine, had a few beers, watched some Netflix, slept like a baby. Next morning I woke up to find Alfie sitting by the glass doors, staring out at the hills. His back was rigid, tail still, just watching. I scratched his head. "See a sheep, mate?" Nothing. Didn't even blink. I looked outside, just fog rolling through the valley, slow and thick. The trees were barely silhouettes in it. Gave me the creeps, but I laughed it off. "All right, weirdo. Breakfast time." He didn't move. Had to physically pull him away from the glass. That was the first thing. The second thing happened that night. I was half asleep when I heard it. Faint. A knock, not at the door, at the window. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, telling myself I imagined it. Then it came again, 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Tap, tap, tap. Alfie growled, deep in his throat. Not barking, just this low, warning sound. I reached for my phone, checked the time. 3:12 a.m. Classic horror movie shit. I didn't want to, but I had to look. I rolled over, faced the window. Nothing. Just the dark valley beyond. No lights, no movement. I exhaled, let out a nervous chuckle. Jesus, I'm losing it. Then tap, tap, tap from the other window. I shot up, heart in my throat. My breath fogged up in the cold air. Alfie was standing now, staring toward the noise, every muscle in his body tense. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, shone it toward the glass. The beam reflected off the window, nothing outside. But the knocking kept going, moving, from window to window, like something circling the house. Then it stopped. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Next morning, I checked outside. No footprints, no sign anyone had been there. Just frost on the grass, and that same rolling mist. Alfie wouldn't leave my side. That night, I locked every door, shut the curtains, made sure all the lights were on. Sat on the couch with Alfie next to me, watching some mindless TV, trying to ignore the way my stomach felt tight. Then, thud, from upstairs. I nearly jumped out of my skin. Alfie's ears perked up. He growled low and deep. Someone was in the house. I grabbed the closest thing, a fireplace poker, and crept up the stairs, every floorboard groaning under me. The hallway stretched out, doors closed, everything still. My breath felt loud in my own ears. I reached the guest bedroom, nudged the door open with the poker. Empty. Then the master bedroom. Empty. I let out a breath, turned to leave, and then I heard breathing. Not mine, not Alfie's. Coming from the wardrobe. Shallow, slow, like someone trying not to be heard. The air went cold. My stomach turned to ice. I wanted to run. Every part of me screamed to run. But I had to know. I raised the poker, grabbed the wardrobe handle, yanked it open. Nothing. Just clothes. Hangers swaying slightly, like something had just been there. That was it. I packed my bags, threw them in the car, and called Callum. Told him I was done, told him I didn't care if his uncle was pissed, told him he could come get his damn dog himself. I drove out of there at 3 a.m., didn't stop till I hit the next town. I don't know what was knocking. I don't know what was breathing in that wardrobe, but I know this, whatever it wanted to come inside. This was 2013. I was 21, fresh out of college, broke as hell, and desperate for a cheap place to stay. My old friend Nick had a cousin Jake, who was renting an old house out in Burville, Rhode Island. Middle of nowhere, but the rent was dirt cheap. At the time, I didn't ask why it was so cheap. I should have. I moved in at the start of October. The place was old, big, colonial-style house, peeling white paint, porch that looked like it was about to collapse. Inside was worse. The air was heavy, smelled wrong. Not like mold, not like dust, more like old, rotting wood, mixed with something metallic, like rust. The first night I was unpacking when Jake came to my door. "Oh, just a heads up," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "If you hear anything at night, just ignore it. House makes weird noises." I laughed. "Yeah? What kind of noises?" He hesitated. "Just like knocking, sometimes voices." He forced a smile. "Old pipes, you know?" I didn't know, but I shrugged it off. The first few nights were fine, cold, but fine. But then I started noticing things. It always started around 3 a.m. I woke up to knocking. Not at the front door, not on the walls. It was coming from inside my closet. 3 slow knocks. Tap, tap, tap. I sat up fast, heart hammering. The closet door was cracked open an inch, revealing nothing but darkness. I told myself it was my imagination, that I was half asleep, but then tap, 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 right against the wood. I grabbed my phone, flicked on the flashlight, and shined it toward the closet. Nothing. Just old coats and boxes. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. A week in, I started seeing things. It was always in the same place. My room, right before I fell asleep. You know when you're half awake, half dreaming, and you think you see something out of the corner of your eye? That's what it was like. Except it wasn't a shadow. It was a woman. Tall, gaunt, dressed in black robes. Her skin was stretched too tight over her face, and her mouth, God, her mouth was just wrong. Too wide, like it had been cut ear to ear. She never moved, never blinked, just stood in the corner of my room, her hollow eyes locked onto me. The second I turned my head, she'd be gone. But I could still feel her there. Every night I'd lie awake, sweating, forcing myself not to look at that corner, because I knew, if I did, she'd be standing there, waiting. By the third week, Jake looked like shit. Pale, dark circles under his eyes. I wasn't sleeping either, but neither of us talked about it. Not until the night it got worse. I was in bed scrolling on my phone when I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, moving down the hallway. I froze. It wasn't Jake. His room was on the other side of the house. These footsteps were coming toward my door. I held my breath. They stopped right outside. Then, scrap. A long, dragging scrape against the wood, like nails raking down it. I sat up, my entire body locked in fear. The doorknob rattled. Something was on the other side. I reached for my phone, about to text Jake, when I heard him shout from across the house. "Don't open it!" I nearly pissed myself. The scratching stopped, and silence. Then the footsteps started again, this time rushing back down the hall. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, Jake finally told me everything. He'd moved in 6 months before me. First few weeks were fine, but then he started hearing her. The whispers, the knocks, the footsteps. Then one night he woke up to find her standing over his bed. That was the first time he saw her face. The stretched skin, the too wide grin, her black eyes hollow like a void. That was when he realized she wasn't a ghost. She was something worse. The previous owner left suddenly, abandoning everything. The landlord never said why, but Jake found something in the basement, a trap door under the old carpet. Beneath it, a small bricked-off room. Inside, a single wooden chair. Facing the wall, and scratched into the brick over and over were 3 words, "She never leaves." I left a few days later. Didn't care about the deposit, didn't care about my stuff. I packed a single bag and got the hell out. But my last night in that house, I saw her. Not in the corner, not in the hallway. She was standing inside my closet. I didn't see her move. 1 second it was empty, the next she was there. And this time, she was smiling. Her mouth stretched too far, those black voids where her eyes should have been locked onto me. Then, in that dry, cracked voice, she whispered, "You can't leave." I ran. Didn't stop running until I hit the main road. Slept in my car that night, drove back to Providence at dawn. I never went back. Jake moved out the next week. He never told me where he went. Just packed up and disappeared. The house is still there last I checked. It's been up for rent ever since, but no one ever stays long. And sometimes, late at night, when I wake up too fast, too suddenly, I swear I can still hear it. Tap, 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 right against my closet door. I was 19 in autumn 2007, a second year at Durham University, when Professor Hargrove threw me a job I couldn't pass up. It was after a class on Old English poems in this musty lecture hall that smelled like damp coats and stale coffee. He came up while I was shoving my notes in my bag. Skinny guy, 60s tweed jacket, reeking of pipe smoke. "I'm off to London for a conference," he said, looking at me over his glasses. 2 weeks, need someone to watch my house. 50 quid a day. You up for it? I was broke. Rent, books, living off cheap pasta. So I said yes right there. I figured his place would be some big old house out in the Northumberland countryside, all dark wood and fancy shelves, like those rich estates you see in pictures. I'd always liked that stuff, England how it used to be, quiet and grand. So I packed my rucksack, grabbed my crap Nokia, a couple of textbooks, and took a bus north from Durham the next day. The ride went past the city, out from the cathedral, this massive dark thing looming over everything, into the hills near Corbridge, a little town by the River Tyne where people with money lived. It was late October, cold, air full of wet leaves and smoke from fireplaces, trees dropping yellow and red all over the ground. I liked it, reminded me of those old England vibes, peaceful, like time forgot it. The bus dropped me at this empty stop, just a sign and some gravel, and I walked a mile down a muddy road, wind pulling at my scarf, my trainers soaked by the time I got there. When I saw the house, I stopped cold. It was this big stone place, old, ivy crawling up the walls, tall windows catching the grey light. The garden was a mess, roses tangled with weeds, a fountain half broken, and these bare, twisty trees stood around it. It looked rich, like old money lived there once, but heavy, like it was sizing me up. Inside, it smelled like polish and dust, dark wood everywhere, a chandelier hanging up top all grimy. The staircase was huge, curving up, and these old portraits of stiff-looking guys stared down at me. I dropped my bag, poked around, library full of books, drawing room with a piano under a sheet. It was cool but off, like the air was too still. Professor Hargrove left a note on the kitchen table, scratched out in his messy writing, "Feed the cat, stay out of the study, back on the 20th. Milton, this tabby with a bored look, wandered over while I shook out his food. I picked the guest room upstairs, big bed with these heavy curtains, and got settled with tea and some book about a shipwreck. Wind was loud outside, banging the windows, but I fell asleep fine. Then I woke up to this sound, like a laugh, low and raspy, coming from downstairs. I grabbed my torch, heart already going, and checked it out. Nothing. Just Milton on the stairs, staring at me like I was nuts. I told myself it was the house creaking and went back to bed, the laugh fading away. Next morning, I went outside to look around. The garden was wild, roses, junk, that busted fountain, and I liked how it felt, all old and English, even if it was messy. That night, the laugh came back, sharper, and I heard something else. Footsteps, slow, uneven, like someone dragging a leg. I looked out my window and my gut twisted. Something was out there, past the roses, just a shape in the dark, tall, thin, moving funny. My torch didn't catch it clear, but it jerked out of sight and I felt cold all over. I locked the window, hands shaking, told myself it was an animal or something, and tried to sleep, but I kept hearing those steps in my head. By the third day, I was a wreck. The laugh started coming in the daytime, quiet, creepy, like someone was right behind me, but never there when I turned. Milton got weird, staring at the ceiling, hissing at nothing. One time, I found a picture frame in the drawing room tipped over, old lady in it, glass cracked, and I hadn't touched it. That night, I woke up to the footsteps again, thump, drag, closer now. I checked outside, and there it was, by the hedge. It was tall, way too tall, like a person stretched wrong, arms bent funny, head tilted like it was broken. I couldn't see its face, but it turned toward me, and I swear it smiled, wide, too wide. I slammed the curtains shut, heart pounding, wanting to ditch the 50 quid and bolt, but I'd promised Professor Hargrove I'd stay. I wasn't running over shadows, or my mind messing with me. I locked every door, kept the lamp on, didn't sleep much. It got bad after that. The laughs turned into this voice, deep, rough, saying my name over and over. Sarah, Sarah, like it was tasting it. I'd find scratches on the walls, little ones first, then long, deep ones, like fingers dug in. One day I opened the back door and it stank, like burnt hair and rot, even though nothing was there. Milton stopped eating, just sat by the library fire, and I started crashing there too. On this old couch, fire going to keep me from losing it. The thing kept coming, every night closer, standing by the windows, watching. I'd catch it in flashes, tall, thin, wearing this ragged coat, arms twisted, face all wrong, like a person but stretched and broken, eyes too big, mouth too long. My Nokia had no signal, landline was just static, and I was trapped, couldn't leave, wouldn't leave, and it knew I was stuck. The 10th night was when it came for me. I'd fallen asleep in the library, fire dying, when this crash hit, like glass shattering upstairs. I grabbed a poker from the fireplace, my torch shaking, and went up. The guest room door was wide open, and inside it was destroyed. Bed flipped, curtains shredded, mirror smashed on the floor. The window was shut, but it smelled like ash and wet cloth choking me. Then I heard it, Sarah, right in my ear, low and mean. I turned and there it was, in the hall. It was taller than the doorway, hunched over. This thing in a torn coat, arms dangling too long, fingers bent like hooks. Its face, God, its face, was human but not. Skin pale and tight, eyes huge and black, mouth stretched sideways with these sharp, crooked teeth. It jerked toward me, head twitching, legs bending wrong, and that laugh came out, deep, wet, like it was choking on it. I ran, tripping down the stairs, hearing it behind me, crashing through stuff, wood snapping, voice screaming my name. I ended up in the kitchen, shoving the table against the door, crying, snot all over my face. It smashed through, door flying off, splinters everywhere, and grabbed me, pinning me to the counter. Its face was right there, eyes burning into me, mouth opening wider, teeth glinting, stinking like death and smoke. I felt it in my head, cold, angry, tearing at me, like it wanted my soul. I screamed, kicking, and my hand hit something, a little frame behind the kettle. It was a picture of Jesus, calm, normal. I wasn't into God or even religious, but I was done, dead if I didn't try. I grabbed it, held it up and shouted, "Get out! Christ, save me, I'm begging you." The words flow out of me like if it was automatic. It froze, screamed this awful high sound, like metal bending, clawed at its face and started melting, shrinking, black smoke pouring out. It dropped, gone, just scratches and ash left on the floor. I fell down, clutching the picture, bawling, feeling it warm in my hands like it heard me. When Professor Hargrove got back on the 20th, I was waiting. A wreck. He saw me, pale, shaking, and sighed. "It got you," he said, and we sat in the library. I told him everything over tea, Milton purring, and he looked sorry. "I knew it was haunted," he said, quiet. "Got the house from my dad 20 years ago. There's this old group, the Order of the Hollow Veil, around Corbridge in the 1500s. They called something up, gave it flesh, fed it fear. I found a skull once in the cellar, human, carved with lines, thought it was dead. I'm sorry, Sarah. I didn't think it'd wake up." Before I left, he stopped me by the gate, wind messing with his scarf. "There's this old note," he said, "from a monk in Morpeth, 1532. Called it the husk of sorrow. Not a devil, but something they made. A thing that wears skin and waits. That picture stopping it. That's not normal. Maybe it's still down there, resting." I walked off, his words sticking, cold, knowing I'd faced something real and scared it wasn't over. Alright, I don't usually talk about this, but here it is. It's not one of those my cousin's friend's uncle heard about this place kind of deals. This happened to me. I lived through it, and I swear on my life, I still don't know what the hell was in that house. So, back in 2015, I was 22, just out of college and broke as hell. My buddy Owen had a cousin who owned this old house on Pine Hollow Road, just outside Pittsburgh. Place had been sitting empty for years. His family used to rent it out, but after the last tenants left, nobody wanted it. Rumor was they moved out overnight, left furniture, food in the fridge, even their damn clothes. No explanation, just gone. Owen's cousin wanted someone in there to keep it from falling apart, so he offered it to me cheap, $400 a month, no lease, no questions. Sounded like a steal, right? I figured, yeah, the place might be a little run down, but I wasn't picky. I moved in that November, threw my mattress on the floor, set up my PlayStation, and called it home. At first, nothing weird happened. House was cold, drafty, smelled kind of stale, but that was expected. It had this big, empty living room, old-ass floral wallpaper peeling at the edges, and one of those ugly glass chandeliers that looked like it belonged in a funeral home. The kitchen was small but functional, and the basement, yeah, I didn't mess with the basement. The door was in the hallway by the kitchen, and it just felt wrong, like I'd be walking past it and get this weird, heavy feeling in my chest. You ever feel like a room is watching you? That's how the basement felt. Then the knocking started. At first I thought it was the pipes, old house, you know, but it was too rhythmic. Every night around 2:33 a.m. on the dot, I'd hear it. 3 knocks, pause, 2 more knocks. It sounded like it was coming from inside the walls, like someone was knocking from behind the plaster. I'd sit up in bed, listening, my heart pounding, waiting for it to stop. And it always did. After maybe 10-15 seconds, total silence. One night, I recorded it on my phone. When I played it back the next morning, I almost dropped my damn coffee. There was a voice, faint, barely above a whisper, but clear enough. It said, "Come see." I told Owen about it and he just laughed. "Bro, it's an old house. Houses make noises," he said. "You're freaking yourself out." I wanted to believe that, so I let it go. I stopped recording, stopped trying to explain it. I just lived with it. Then came the footsteps. I was in the kitchen one night, heating up some ramen, when I heard slow, deliberate steps upstairs. My bedroom was up there, but I was home alone. I turned off the stove, heart pounding, and listened. Step, step, step. Not creaks, not random settling, actual footsteps. I grabbed the heaviest thing I could find, which, for the record, was a goddamn frying pan, and crept up the stairs. My bedroom door was open. I never left my door open. Inside, my blankets were messed up, like someone had been sitting on my bed, but the room was empty. Windows locked, closet empty. I searched the whole house, but nothing was out of place, except that. I tried to sleep that night, but every time I started drifting off, I'd hear them again, soft steps pacing just outside my door. I started sleeping with the lights on after that. Then, man, the dream started. Same one, over and over. I'd be standing in the basement, except the basement was different. There was no floor, just a black pit stretching down forever. And in the middle of that darkness, something was looking up at me. Not a person, not an animal, just eyes, huge, yellow, lidless eyes, and as I stared down, frozen, it would start climbing. Not fast, not frantic, just slow, steady, like it knew I couldn't move, and right before it reached me, I'd wake up drenched in sweat. After the 4th or 5th time, I stopped sleeping altogether. I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't just a dream. Something was in that basement. Something knew I was there. The final straw, the thing that made me leave, was the mirror. I had this old mirror in my bedroom, left by the previous tenants. Nothing special, just a tall, rectangular thing with a plain wooden frame. One night I woke up and saw that it had moved. It was facing my bed. Now I don't sleepwalk. I don't move furniture in my sleep. But there it was, angled toward me, like someone had dragged it across the floor. My skin went ice cold. I sat up staring at it, and that's when I saw the smudge. A long, dark handprint near the bottom of the glass. Not mine. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and held it up to the mirror. For half a second, I swear to God, I saw something standing behind me. Tall, thin, arms too long, head tilted like it was listening. Then it smiled, not a normal smile. Too wide, too sharp. I spun around, ready to swing, but there was nothing there. Just my empty room. I was gone by morning. Left everything. Mattress, TV, clothes, didn't care. I called Owen, told him to tell his cousin I wasn't staying another night. Moved in with a friend, crashed on his couch for a few months, never went back. A few weeks later, I got curious and looked up the address. The house had a history. Back in 1948, a guy named Howard Lyman lived there. Regular dude, worked at the steel mill, nothing weird, until one day, he snapped, killed his wife and kid, dragged their bodies to the basement and just vanished. The cops never found him. Neighbors swore they saw him standing in the windows for years after, long after the place should have been empty. I don't know what's in that house, man. Maybe it's him. Maybe it's something worse. All I know is some places don't want people living in them. They want people to stay. Or worse, they want people to come back. And sometimes I still have the dream, the pit, the eyes, the thing climbing toward me. I just hope it never makes it all the way up. I'd always been a skeptic. Growing up in Newark, I'd scoff at my buddies who swore their grandmas saw spirits in the Pine Barrens or heard the Jersey Devil flap overhead. My wife, Jen, was the believer. She'd devour ghost podcasts and nudge me during storms, saying, "Hear that? Could be something." I'd roll my eyes, blame the wind, and that was that. But after we moved into the house on Old Mill Lane, my skepticism died. What happened there wasn't wind, wasn't imagination. It was real, and it wanted us gone. We bought the place in November 2024, a 2-story fixer-upper in Adams, Tennessee, about an hour northwest of Nashville. It was dirt cheap, $245,000 for 4 bedrooms, a sagging porch, and 5 acres of overgrown fields. Jen found it on Zillow, sold on the idea of raising our kids, Lila, 9, and Ben, 6, somewhere quiet, away from the city grind. I'd just landed a remote gig fixing up car manuals, and Jen's nursing job let her transfer to a clinic nearby. The house was old, built in the 1830s, with peeling paint and a roof that had seen better days, but we figured we'd patch it up over time. The realtor, a greasy guy named Dale, rushed us through the tour, muttering about some history, but dodging details. We signed anyway. Moved in by December. That's when it started. The first month was normal enough. The house creaked like hell, floorboards groaned under every step, and the wind whistled through gaps in the window frames. It smelled musty, like wet hay and old wood, especially near the stairs to the attic. I planned to seal it up later. The trapdoor was warped, stuck shut with rust and age. Lila and Ben loved the space. Lila claimed a room with a slanted ceiling for her books. Ben took the one next door, turning it into a fort with blankets and his toy soldiers. Jen and I unpacked slow, juggling work and keeping the kids from tripping over boxes. It felt like a win, like we'd finally made it. But there were signs, little things I ignored. It started with the cold, not the whole house, just spots, sharp and sudden, like stepping into a freezer. The kitchen was the worst. I'd be frying eggs, and my breath would fog up out of nowhere. Jen noticed it too, rubbing her arms and joking about ghostly roommates. I'd laugh, blame the drafty windows, but I started avoiding the kitchen after dark. Then the kids mentioned the whispering. Ben brought it up first over cereal one morning. "Something talks in my wall," he said, spoon halfway to his mouth. "Like this." He made a low, hissing sound, barely audible. Lila nodded, serious. "I hear it too, at night. It says stuff I can't understand." I figured it was pipes. Old houses have noises, right? I tapped the walls, heard nothing, told them it was just the place settling. They didn't push it, but I saw them exchange a look. By January, the whispers weren't just the kids' story. I'd hear them late at night, lying in bed with Jen asleep beside me. A faint rasp, like someone dragging their voice through gravel, seeping from the walls. I'd sit up, strain my ears. It'd stop the second I moved. Jen heard it once, woke me at 2 a.m., eyes wide. "Mike, tell me you heard that." I had a slow, deliberate shh, shh, like fingernails scraping plaster. I grabbed a flashlight, checked the kids' rooms, the hall, the attic trapdoor. Nothing. Empty. I told her it was mice, maybe bats. She didn't buy it, but we let it drop. Things got worse in February. The cold spots spread. Whole rooms now, icy enough to make your teeth chatter. The light started acting up, not just flickering, but pulsing, slow and rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Ben stopped sleeping in his room. He'd crawl into Lila's bed, saying the whispers were louder, angrier. "It hates my soldiers," he'd mumble, clutching his blanket. Lila backed him up, said she'd wake to find her books rearranged, pages torn out, stacked in weird piles by her door. I searched their rooms, found nothing but dust and a faint smell, sour and sharp, like vinegar gone bad. Jen wanted to call someone, a priest, a medium, anything. I said no, we'd handle it. I wish I'd listened. One night I found the first mark. It was scratched into the attic trapdoor, 3 jagged lines like claw marks, fresh enough the wood splinters were still curling. I hadn't been up there. No one had. I stared at it, flashlight shaking in my hand, and heard it, a laugh, low and wet, bubbling up from below the floor. Not the attic, the basement. I'd only been down there once, a damp concrete hole with a dirt patch in the corner, left over from some old repair. I bolted the trapdoor shut with a padlock from my toolbox, checked the basement door too. Locked. The laugh didn't come again, but I didn't sleep. March brought the dreams. Lila started them. Nightmares about a woman in a black shawl, hunched and faceless, standing in her room. "She whispers my name," Lila told us, pale over breakfast. "She says I'm hers." Ben had them next. Same woman, same shawl, pointing at him from his window. Jen and I didn't dream, but we'd wake to the kids screaming, soaked in sweat. I checked the house. Windows shut, doors locked, no one there. Then I found the second mark, same claw lines, carved into Ben's headboard, right above where he'd slept. I moved them both to our room that night, pallets on the floor. The whispers followed, louder, a chorus of rasps now, weaving through the walls. I dug into the house's past after that, took a day off, hit the Adams Library, flipped through old records, found it in a dusty book on local legends, The Bell Witch. Back in 1817, a family named Bell lived a mile from our lot, tormented by a spirit, a woman's voice that scratched, laughed, and drove them mad. It killed John Bell, poisoned him slow, left claw marks on their walls. Historians called it folklore, But the book said the Bell's land stretched wider than maps showed, right up to Old Mill Lane. A chill ran through me. The sour smell, the whispers, the marks. It matched. I didn't tell Jen yet. Didn't want to scare her more. April turned it physical. Toys smashed. Ben's soldiers snapped in half. Lila's books shredded like confetti. The basement door unbolted itself overnight. I'd find it ajar, the padlock untouched on the floor. That vinegar smell poured out, thick enough to gag. Jen caught scratches on Ben's arm one morning, 3 red lines, shallow but raw. He didn't do it, she said, voice shaking. I watched him sleep. I called a contractor to board the basement up. Guy came, took one look down there, left without a word, said he'd mail the deposit back. That night, the laughing started again, loud, bouncing off every wall, waking us all. Lila screamed, "She's here." I grabbed my bat, checked the house, nothing but that smell, that cold, that sound. The end came on April 19th. It was a Saturday, grey and still outside. Jen was at the clinic, late shift. I was home with the kids, trying to keep them calm. Lila read in the living room. Ben played with his one unbroken soldier on the rug. Around 8 p.m, the lights pulsed, slow and heavy, then died. Power outage, I thought. Happened out here sometimes. I lit candles, told the kids to stay put, grabbed my flashlight to check the breaker in the basement. Hated going down there, but I had to. The stairs creaked under my boots, the air thick with that sour stink. The flashlight beam shook as I scanned the concrete. Breaker box in the corner, flip switches, fine. Then I saw it. The dirt patch churned up like something clawed its way out. A laugh, wet, guttural, rolled up from it, and the whispering started fast and furious, words I couldn't catch. I backed up, hit the stairs, and heard Lila upstairs. "Daddy, help!" I bolted up, slamming the door, heart pounding. She was by the couch, eyes huge, pointing at the wall. "She's coming," she sobbed. Ben was beside her, trembling, staring at the same spot. The whispers turned to a hiss, loud, everywhere, and the candles flared, wax spitting. Then the air split, a crack like thunder, and she was there. Not a shadow, not a trick. A woman, real as us, standing in the center of the room. Her shawl was black, tattered, hanging off a hunched frame. Her hands were bone-thin, nails long and yellowed, twitching like they ached to grab. Her face, no eyes, no mouth, just a blank stretch of grey skin, quivering where features should have been. The smell hit hard, vinegar and rot, choking me. She didn't move, just stood there, but her voice came, raspy, old, filling the house. "This land is mine. You're mine." The walls shook, pictures crashing, and the kids screamed, clawing at me. I swung the bat, hit air, stumbled, and she laughed, loud and wet, the sound burrowing into my skull. The floor buckled under her, wood splintering, and she sank an inch, then 2, like the house was swallowing her back. I grabbed Lila and Ben, ran for the door. She was behind us, gliding now, her shawl brushing the rug, that blank face tilting toward us. The cold burned my lungs as I yanked the truck keys from the hook, shoved the kids outside. We made it to the truck, engine roaring to life as I floored it down Old Mill Lane, dust kicking up in the rear view. She didn't follow, not that I could see, but the laugh lingered, echoing in my ears even as we hit the highway. I drove straight to Jen's clinic, hands shaking on the wheel. She met us in the parking lot, took one look at the kids' tear-streaked faces, and climbed in without a word. We didn't stop till we hit a friend's place in Clarksville, 40 miles away. Crashed on their couch, left everything behind, the kids' toys, my tools, Jen's laptop. Didn't matter. We rented a trailer in Nashville after that, a cramped box with thin walls, but it's quiet. The house on Old Mill Lane's still up for sale. Saw it online, $210,000 now, as is. No one's biting. Sometimes I drive past Adams on my way to a job, and I swear the air shifts. Sour, cold, like it's reaching for me. Lila won't talk about it. Ben flinches at shadows. Jen keeps a light on at night. Me? I don't sleep much. That laugh, it's in my head, waiting for me to close my eyes. I don't know what she was, but I know she's still there, rooted in that land, claiming it. And I'm scared she's keeping a spot warm for us. So, this all happened back in 1993, when I was 16 and living with my dad in this little suburb outside Columbus, Ohio. We'd just moved into this house on Elmwood Drive, A two-story place that looked like every other house on the block. White siding, patchy lawn, a couple of scraggly trees out front. Dad got it cheap after the divorce, said it was a fresh start for us. I didn't care much either way. I just wanted my own room and a place to plug in my Super Nintendo. But from the first day we pulled up in the U-Haul, something about that house felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it then. Just a weird itch in the back of my mind, like someone was watching me unpack boxes. The first time I saw her was maybe a week after we settled in. It was late, probably around 10, and I was taking the trash out to the curb. The street was quiet, just the hum of crickets and the occasional car rolling by. I glanced up at the house and there she was, standing in the attic window, a girl pale as hell with long dark hair hanging over her face. She wasn't moving, just staring down at me. My stomach dropped. We didn't have an attic we used. It was one of those trapdoor deals in the ceiling, and Dad said it was just insulation and junk up there. I stood there, frozen, trash bag dangling from my hand, waiting for her to do something. She didn't. She just kept looking at me, her head tilted a little, like she was curious. I ran back inside and told Dad. He laughed it off, said I'd probably seen my own reflection or some trick of the light. He was tired from work, always was back then, so I didn't push it. But I knew what I saw wasn't a reflection. Reflections don't have faces that pale, eyes that dark. I went to bed that night with the covers pulled up tight, listening to every creak the house made, wondering if she was still up there, watching. The next morning, I climbed into the attic to check. Dad had this rickety stepladder, and I hauled it under the trapdoor in the hallway, my hands shaking a little as I pushed it open. The air up there was thick, dusty and cold, way colder than it should have been for August. I poked my head up with a flashlight, swinging the beam around. Nothing. Just insulation packed between the beams, some old boxes covered in cobwebs, and a single bare bulb hanging from a wire. No girl, no sign of anyone. But the floorboards up there were scratched, long jagged lines, like someone had dragged something heavy across them. I told myself it was probably rats or squirrels, but it didn't feel right. I climbed back down, shut the trapdoor, and tried to forget about it. She showed up again a few nights later. I was in my room playing Mario Kart when I got this weird urge to look out my window. It faced the front yard, and from there I could see the attic window above me. There she was again, same spot, same pose, staring down. My heart started pounding, and I yanked the curtains shut so fast I almost ripped them off the rod. I sat there on my bed, controller still in my hands, listening to the hum of the TV. The house was quiet, too quiet, and I kept picturing her up there, her feet inches above my ceiling. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, those empty black eyes boring into me. It went on like that for weeks. I'd see her randomly, sometimes at night, sometimes in broad daylight, always in that attic window, always watching me. I stopped telling Dad about it because he'd just roll his eyes and say I was imagining things. Maybe I was, I thought. Maybe I was losing it. But then I'd catch her again, and that doubt would melt away into this cold, sinking fear. I started keeping my blinds closed, avoiding the front yard, anything to not see her. But it didn't help. I'd feel her anyway, like this weight pressing down on me, even when I couldn't see her. One day, I got this idea to prove it. I'd borrowed my friend Mike's camcorder for a school project, this clunky old thing that recorded on VHS tapes. I figured if I could catch her on video, I'd have something real, something I could show Dad or anybody. So that night, around midnight, I set it up in my room. I pointed it out my window, aimed it at the attic, and hit record. My hands were sweaty, and I kept glancing at the little red light on the camcorder, making sure it was working. I waited, sitting on my bed in the dark, the only sound the soft whir of the tape spinning. She showed up around 1 a.m. I saw her first through the viewfinder. Just a faint shape at first, then clearer as my eyes adjusted. There she was, pale and still, her hair falling over her face like a curtain. My throat went dry, but I didn't move. I let the tape roll for maybe 5 minutes, watching her stand there, not blinking, not shifting, just staring. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I turned off the camcorder, pulled the tape out, and shoved it under my pillow. I didn't look at it that night. I couldn't. I just lay there, heart hammering, telling myself I'd check it in the morning when the sun was up, and the house didn't feel so alive. The next day, I hooked the camcorder up to the TV in the living room. Dad was at work, so it was just me in the house. I rewound the tape, pressed play, and watched. The first few minutes were just the attic window, empty and dark, the glass reflecting a little moonlight. Then, right where I knew she'd appeared, it was still empty. No girl, no pale face, nothing. Just the window, sitting there like it was mocking me. I rewound it, played it again, same thing. My stomach twisted. I knew she'd been there. I'd seen her with my own eyes, not just through the lens, but the tape showed nothing, like she'd erased herself from it. That's when the power cut out. The TV went black, the hum of the fridge stopped. Everything went dead silent. I sat there on the couch, tape still in my hand, and then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate steps coming from upstairs, right above me. They weren't Dad's, he was gone till 6, and they weren't mine. They sounded heavy, dragging a little like someone was walking barefoot across the hardwood. I looked up at the ceiling and the footsteps moved toward the hallway, then stopped right where the attic trapdoor was. I don't know why I did it, but I grabbed a kitchen knife and crept upstairs. The air felt thick, like it was pressing against me, and every step I took echoed too loud in my ears. When I got to the hallway, the trapdoor was still shut, but the ladder was down. I hadn't touched it since that first day. My mouth went dry, and I stood there, knife shaking in my hand, staring up into that black square of darkness. Then I heard it. A low, raspy breath, like someone exhaling right above me. I bolted, dropped the knife, ran downstairs, grabbed my bike, and pedaled to Mike's house 3 blocks away. I didn't care how stupid I looked. I just had to get out. I stayed at Mike's that night, told Dad I was sleeping over. When I got back the next morning, he was pissed, said he'd found me locked in the attic when he got home from work. I tried to tell him that wasn't possible. I'd been gone all night, but he wouldn't listen. He said he'd heard me banging around up there around 2 a.m., went to check, and found the trapdoor shut with the ladder pulled up. He had to break the lock to get me out, and when he did, I was curled up in the corner, muttering about hands on my neck. I don't remember any of that. I wasn't there, but he swore it was me, said I looked half dead when he dragged me out. We moved a month later. Dad never said why, but I think he knew something was wrong with that house. I never went back to Elmwood Drive, but years later, I heard from a guy who lived there after us. He said he'd see her too, that same girl in the attic window watching him. He didn't stay long either. The house is still there, last I checked, just sitting empty most of the time. I don't know who she was or what she wanted, but I can still feel her eyes on me sometimes, even now, like she's still up there, waiting for me to look back. And that's it for tonight. I hope you enjoyed these terrifying haunted house stories, each one a reminder that sometimes the scariest things aren't in movies. They're in the places we call home. There's something unsettling about a house with a past, isn't there? A place that holds memories, whispers in the walls, shadows that don't quite belong. But hey, maybe it's just the wind, or maybe it's something else. Thanks for spending your time here on Char TV. If you liked the video, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. We've got plenty more stories to tell, and trust me, you'll want to hear them. Stay safe, sleep well, and as always, thanks for watching.